All right.
Hi, I'm Mike London. I'm visiting with artists and arts leaders who are working here in Miami Valley. Culture Work supports a wide range of artists and arts organizations, and these interviews are our chance to be able to get to know a few of them. So today I'm speaking with Matt Burgy. Matt, how are you?
Doing good. Doing good.
Yeah, it's been a while. Now that I'm thinking about it, we haven't had a chance to connect for a while. I was looking forward to
Oh,
connecting with you a month ago, but we all know how that went.
yeah, I know. Everything has been quite different with the whole pandemic thing going on. We're all having to make a lot of adjustments, and
Yeah.
yeah, I miss being able to get out and paint for you guys too, and do all sorts of fun things like that. It's
Yeah. So tell us about, I know your work. I love your work, but so nobody, it's somebody who's watching this, they've never seen you, they don't know who you are. Tell them about yourself.
well, basically, I'm a local artist. A lot of people know me for a lot of different materials and mediums that I work with. I work with sculpture, painting. Most people probably know me the best probably for my sculpture, my kinetic works that I do. But I also, yeah, I paint quite a bit, as you can see with my, right, there we go. Still getting used to the virtual part.
I know,
You
I love it when you can put your hand right into the art.
I know, it's like, it like totally disappears, right?
Yeah. So let's start with that. Tell me about that.
Sure. Okay. So this is a painting, a self-portrait that I did back when I was actually, believe it or not, in college. This was actually a one of my first self-portraits I ever painted, and I was painting in oil.
Yeah.
Honestly, I've used it for a whole wide variety of things. I use it on my business cards and things like that. I honestly probably need to update it, especially post-corona now. Beard's growing a lot more. Uh, things have changed. Yeah, yeah, you as well. Yeah,
Yeah. We've all got corona beards. Yeah.
yeah.
Some people said, this is funny because some people said, well, this is my way of marking, the event. And somebody else said, well, this was because I wasn't at work. And somebody else was very honest. It was really sweet. And he just goes, oh, hell, I was my chance just to be lazy and forget the razor. I'm like, okay, dude, most of us are with you.
Yeah, I would say it's probably a combination of all three. I'm like, I'm basically, yeah. I always kind of wanted to grow it out a decent amount, but I just never really got the chance to without
Yeah.
yeah, without being able to experiment a little bit. So I really let it kind of go out. It's not like drastic, but yeah, it's
No,
interesting.
and it looks great. It's nice though to catch up with everybody else, isn't it?
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, some people have been wearing, I have two sons that both have full beards and have had and keep going, when you're going to grow it out? And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know, whatever." Well, that's happened.
I got a good friend of mine, Jim DeLang, who I hadn't seen in a while, and we meet with Art Lunch, the
Yeah.
virtual kind of art group that we do. And I hadn't seen him in a long time, and he'd grown his beard out, and it's like ZZ Top level at that point, and it's just amazing.
Yeah. It's
uh,
cool. It's
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
So a
So
lot of people know you from your, I mean, you mentioned, your different, your painting, your sculpture, and your 3D work, but there's a lot of people who know you from your chalk work too.
yeah, yeah. Actually, I have. Watch this. This is the fun part of being virtual. I can kind of flip through and kind of show
Oh,
you.
can you show us something? Yeah, show us some of your work, man. Oh, look.
So this, let's see if I can, there we go. So this is a piece I actually did with Culture Works
Yeah.
out there. And some different chalk art pieces I did. That was just day one. I was there for a 2-day event, so it ended up growing a lot bigger that way.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and you can kind of get an idea of scale if I put myself in there on how big these ended up being. But yeah, I do a lot of different chalk pieces. About I guess about 2 years ago at the Ohio State Fair, I did this piece. I may have to duck out of the way for that
That's
one.
cool.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. With that one, I can actually now watch this. I actually got an award with that one. I was awarded for the Greater Columbus Arts Council Award there. So that was pretty neat. And then
Yeah,
to give
that's
you an idea,
cool.
yeah, that's a pretty good size piece that I've done. There's two.
Yeah.
I love doing chalk art. It's great. It's nice to do when it's not raining. It's one of the pieces. I've encountered it when it rains, and well, it's just what they say. It's a wash sometimes.
So yeah, but Matt, when you're doing something like that, I mean, I love your chalk art. I just get the biggest kick out of it. Love those butterflies and you.
Yeah.
Well, I won't go on about those, but there's so many other things you've done. But how do you feel about? I mean, that's an enormous amount of work. I've watched you do this. I mean,
Hmm.
look at that. Look at that. Now,
Yeah.
do, how do you feel seriously? How do you feel about the idea that one, it's getting walked on, if it does, or by somebody who doesn't pay attention, or the fact that it's just gonna, the rain is just gonna.
You kind of, when you make chalk art, you know that going into it. It's one thing if you're gonna make, like, because I've painted large murals. I painted a really large mural just a couple of years ago for a church, a really large one, St. George Episcopal out in Kettering. Um, and I know that's gonna be permanent, right? But these, I know they're gonna be temporary. So as long as I know that going in, I'm okay with it. It's like, it's when you kind of are thinking it's going to last a lot longer. Probably the shortest my chalk art has ever lasted. I did one for the Dayton Public Library, and they actually had blocked off the street. They actually gave me the royal treatment. They put like a velvet rope around me and everything, and I'm working. And yeah, they had everything blocked off, and I'm actually talking to some security there, and they're really loving it. They want to take pictures with it and everything. And the event's over, and a person, while we're talking in the street, drove right over it. Just drove over it with their car, and it was a picture of Superman. So I thought that was a little extra ironic, that Superman got run over. I was like, okay, well, I guess kryptonite and Volkswagens are his two.
Yeah.
Um, but it
Oh
was very
wow.
short-lived. I just finished it maybe 10 minutes before, so that was a little painful. Normally I'm used to them lasting, a couple days at least. This one in particular, actually, I did out in Waynesville, out where I live, and I was for a
Yeah.
festival, and I was told by the organizer that for about a week, no one would park. It was in the street, but no one would park on it. Everyone wanted to like keep away from it, and so I was like, "Well, that's good." I mean, they must have
That's
really liked that one
cool.
in particular. But yeah, so I'll be working on these, and I mean, it's a lot of fun. But yeah, it's in a way, it's kind of cathartic. It's like, you're going to be working on this, but you also know it's going to kind of disappear. It reminds me a lot of the like the Tibetan monk sand paintings that they do, where they're
Mhm.
working on those and then they purposely wipe it away. I don't know if I could personally wipe mine away or not. Um, but um,
Mhm.
but yeah, I kudos to them for being able to do that after all that hard work. Um, but
I
yeah,
love it.
yeah,
Uh,
wide variety of types.
is
I mean,
well, let
you can
me
see my.
ask you this. Oh, look, tell us about this.
That one is another one I did. So, like, basically, I would go to these chalk festivals that they would have at Waynesville. So there's the one there. They
Yeah.
asked me to come back again. I made another one for them. I try to kind of reference ones. With this one, it's kind of an abstraction of the Venus de Milo that we
Right.
have there. But I would win the award. Like, you see the blue
Yes.
ribbon, things like that. But yeah, I would do these, and I kind of became known a little bit in the area. Like, oh, you're the guy who did that. I was like, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. You're the guy.
you're that guy. Yeah. So yeah, they're a lot of fun.
So you've done these, you've worked in different mediums. Which is your favorite, or do you have a favorite?
I have several favorites, but I would say if I was forced to work in different materials, I mean, here's like a kinetic piece. I would probably say metal is probably my most favorite. Uh,
Really?
Working with metal, welding. When when I went to Wright State, I liked it so much I went there twice. Got my bachelor's in fine art. And then I got my master's in art ed out there. And while I was getting my grad degree, I asked the sculpture professor, Tom McCauley, and I was like, hey, you know me, can I just come into the metal studio and just work? It can be on the down low. He's like, well, no, we do have to make sure it's an independent study. So I was like, okay. So he gave me a 1 credit independent study, and I just worked in that studio anytime I could. I'd finish class, I'd go down there.
It's
Just
like, can I come play?
Yeah, really. It's like I love it. I love working with steel, and I dream about that studio every now and then. It's just like there's something about a little guy like me being able to bend steel. Uh, it's just kind of like just the permanence of it and the ability just to have this wonderful medium that's built to last. It's kind of like the opposite of the chalk art in a way. It's like the steel works are going to last quite some time. The chalk arts are temporary, but I'm pretty flexible. I work in a lot of different modes there. This one in particular, I know this one I'm kind of blocking the
That's
keyboard.
okay. Tell us about this.
This one is actually, it's called Full Circle, because the base for this is actually a piece I made at Wright State when I was in my grad degree. And part of my the independent study, I actually sat and just welded bases because I was thinking very long term. And I welded all these bases while I had all that really awesome equipment. I do have a welder now, so I'm kind of excited to be able to use that. So I made that piece about, let's see, oh golly, I guess about 10 years ago, the base for it. And then I didn't finish the other piece, the kinetic part, the part that moves, until maybe about 2017, 2016, something like that. So it's kind of like going back in time and working with myself. It's kind of a really
Yeah.
unusual way to work, where it's like, you're a much different person, a different artist. You're working together, but then life kind of comes full circle this way, which is where the name of the piece comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to make. But maybe, there we go. So I can flip it around the other side, so you can kind of see that base that I welded there for it.
Where is this now?
This is actually living in my studio.
Wonderful.
I've had it on display. It was actually at what's now called the Contemporary, and
Yes.
over at Rosewood Art Center. So I've had it on display several places. Yeah, it's but yeah, it lives with me. It's one of my favorite pieces I've done. But I've made a lot of other different kinetic pieces as well. Like I have this one. This one no longer lives with me because I sold it, which is always a fun thing to get to say as an artist. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I work with a lot of different pieces, and just something about metal. It has all these weird characteristics where you're working with it, and it's very strong, but can also be lightweight. It's also bendable. It can look like it's almost rippling. If you work on it, it's got a lot of malleable qualities to it. I also like working in clay for that reason too, because it's very workable. And a lot of the mediums I work with, I prefer them to be forgivable, if that makes sense. Where I'm working with it, but I can go back and fix it if I need to, as
So
opposed
is
to.
metal forgivable?
Believe it or not, yeah, you can actually cut it, you can bend it, you can reshape it, you can weld it. It's, even though it does seem like it's super strong,
Yeah.
whereas ceramics are unforgivable. I love working with the clay while it's still clay, but once you break a clay piece, that's it. You you can't fix that. I mean, you can do some cool other processes.
Right.
Uh, like there's the Japanese technique, and I forget the name of it, so I apologize on that. But where you take the gold, like actual gold, and you fill it, and it actually leaves all these really cool marks inside of it. So it like fuses it together. But that's a very complicated and expensive process that I haven't gotten into. Um, but yeah, it's. But I like working with materials that I can go back and forth with, especially like working with charcoal, things like that. But I would say, long story short, I guess to answer your question, it's metal has always kind of been something I always just keep coming back to. It's one of those mediums that is just always just more to learn. It's I think that's what it is. It's like you can learn a lot about a lot of different materials, but for me in particular, metal just wants me to explore more. In particular, it's just yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. My grandson, and he's studying welding and working with metals and
Yeah.
everything, and he loves it. And so I know we've talked about it, and I I guess like any other art, I mean, he was talking about making swords and other things, but
Oh yeah, yeah.
but it's like I can see the passion, and that there's a
Mhm.
connection between that particular medium and him. Um, Even though I have to admit some of it, I just feel the breeze. It goes right on by me, It's like, I
Yeah.
think I understand, and then I go, I don't need to understand. All I need to know is that this is what's important to him, just like yours.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. And a lot of times, it's a complicated thing sometimes when you talk to galleries about being an artist that works in so many different mediums,
Yeah.
because they often they want you to be just this guy, the
So
guy who does this or the
to
guy who
fit
does
in a
that.
mold.
Yeah, and as artists, we don't really typically like to be put in a mold. We typically like to break those molds, and I kind of compare it to like an ice cream shop. It's like you wouldn't necessarily want to go into an ice cream shop and they only have one flavor. It's like if I can make my own ice cream, I'm going to experiment with as many different flavors as I can. It's like why not try out more than one? And but they're all universally combined. They're all actually connected to nature for me. I actually really love to study nature. To give you an example, I'll show you this piece here.
Yeah.
It's another kinetic piece
Oh,
that
I
I
love that.
well, thank you. And this one's actually based off of a tree that's not too far down the street from where I'm at. It's got this really weird bend, this really weird curve to it, and every time I drive by it, although not as much now post Corona, but every time I drive by, I just look at it, I'm like, this tree has just been through things. It's got a history to it, and that brings me to like bringing, even making paintings. Not the same tree, but the same
Yeah.
idea. Just kind of these trees that have been through things. There's just kind of a history to them. This is a very, people look at this tree and it's like, that's kind of a very unusual tree. I'm like, it's a real tree. It's been through some things. It's kind of like, in a way, they're all kind of like nature and self-portraits and, different things that are connected. We all have a history of going through things. And this particular tree, oops, I got to point the right way. I still got to get that down.
Yeah.
But these trees, they've been through things, but they're still standing. And that says a lot about those trees, like, just like all of us, we are going to be kind of like these trees. Maybe we're growing our our beards long or whatnot. We'll be a little disheveled for a while, but we're going to make it through it. I think we're going to come out even better for the fact. I think as a result of all this, as hard
Mhm.
as it's been. So like having kind of these strong roots mean a lot to me. Like even if you see the necklace I have,
Mhm.
this
Yeah.
whole idea of like the tree of life. Isn't it
Yeah.
cool? I can just flip through these pictures.
That
But
is so cool.
yeah, so like the tree of life is a big meaning for me as well. Both on a faith based as well as just kind of an icon based. Seeing these out in Hawaii. I was out in Hawaii a couple years ago, and you see these really awesome banyan trees out there, and they just, they've been there forever, and they got this history to them, and um, every single one's a little unique, but they got this awesome root structure. There's even the walking trees out in Hawaii. I don't know if
Yeah.
you've ever heard of those, but yeah, those are amazing. Where it's like over time, the roots actually will grow from the top down, and then slowly it actually moves across the surface as opposed to growing from the bottom up.
Yeah.
Uh, so it's just fascinating. Like I find trees in particular. Just a fascinating thing, this idea.
Yeah, they really are. Remind me sometime. I won't do it now, but remind me sometime. I've got a tree story and a painting to tell you about.
Oh, sure.
It,
Awesome. Yeah.
it's a good one. We won't take time for it now, but it's
Oh,
you'll
that's
get a
okay.
kick out of it. Um,
Okay.
what else you got there?
Other pictures? Oh yeah, I got,
Yeah,
like drawings. I do portraits, things like that. There's my buddy
yeah,
Van Gogh, that we have there. A lot of people, like, if I this way, like
yeah,
sometimes
yeah,
people,
yeah.
they kind of see some of those similarities a little bit. But I did this one that's kind of fun because every now and then, maybe not as much now, post Corona, but I'll be in restaurants and things, and I'll be drawing, and then all of a sudden it just draws a crowd. Like, people are like, oh, you're drawing this. And I was just I was waiting for somebody on this one. I was just kind of like, well, I'll just spend my time drawing. And they were like, wow, you drawing this? And I was like, is this a self portrait? I'm like, no, it's Van Gogh. you know, um, but yeah, I've done, like, I love working with charcoal. A lot of people ask, like, "Oh, that's your girlfriend." I was like, "No, I wish." uh, Good old Audrey Hepburn, that's there.
Yeah, yeah.
Another larger one I've done, I've been working on this one for
Oh,
quite some time. I've had this in the studio, and I've been working on and off for probably a decade. And when I say a decade, it's not like I'm sitting there for hours and hours and hours every day.
sure.
It's kind of been over a process that I've been working on.
So
Uh,
where does it start for you, Matt? I mean,
sure.
what is it that sparks your interest or that inspiration, or is it just a what is it that
Kind of a wide
generally?
Yeah, it's like, it's a lot of people. It looks like maybe I'm a little crazy, but it's all, like I said, kind of inspired by the same source. Like, I'll look at nature. Um, I'll think about a lot of different things. I would say there's inspiration and there's motivation. Inspiration a lot of times comes from nature, studying trees, studying the way that the wind blows and makes things move. Like, if I'm looking at kinetic pieces and seeing how these pieces, or the parts of the trees move, I'm watching that, watching how, especially if you watch plants and they stretch towards the sun, and you see, like, especially like long vines kind of like reaching out towards the sun, and they just keep stretching and going, and they still can, like, have this kind of spring action. They kind of like move and just very gentle, and I'm like, how does that hold up? It seems very heavy, it would look like. But again, working with the metals and things like that, I can make things very heavy look very lightweight. So, like, kind of flipping things around, flipping them on their heads, changes the way that they look. But I'll look at nature, I'll get inspired by it, but then there's also motivation. I'll get my ideas from nature, but the motivation often comes from two different sources. And I think a lot of different artists can kind of relate to at least one or two of these. There's faith, and then there's frustration. So, and sometimes frustration with faith, and so, there's two different things that can go together. So, like this tree in particular, it has to do the idea of, like, a tree of life. This all, uh, life-giving source. The trees are a symbol for that. They grow fruit, they grow our food. The idea of the tree of life is like, the world before it was corrupted and everything fell apart. This idea of a society that's together as one, is a big part, especially these days. And I think a lot about, these different items there. So my faith has an aspect there, but then there's also some frustration that comes, along with it, where, like, you go through life and things happen to you, and, um, it's frustrating, some of the things you go through, but you still stand strong because you know where you're rooted. And that's, where I have an inspiration for this. Like, you see this tree here, and then as I'm working with that tree, I'm like, that would be, because I try to think of a material that best translates my idea, not the other way around. Like, um, so it's or I should say, it's like, so I have my idea, and I think of what material works best with it, I guess, is probably the best way to say it. um, and I'm never satisfied. So I'm like, I'll work with, this tree here, and I'm like, that captures the color and the shape of it, but it didn't capture the motion of it, like what could I do to really kind of give this idea, and then I'll be like, okay, let's maybe translate that, and so I can kind of get the idea of this feeling. So you can kind of see it's got this sharp kind of ideas of like the pine tree
Mhm.
that are in with that, even though it's inspired by a tree that's not a pine tree. So it's a kind of a mesh. And this one in particular, like you'll look at it and you'll think, well, this is an interesting piece that's here. And maybe I'll tell you it's inspired by a tree, but it goes even deeper than that. There's a lot of symbology that's hidden in a lot of my work. I don't normally tell a whole bunch of people, but it's personal to me. Like this one in particular, I call it sign of life. I don't know if you can see it really well, but if you look, oh, it's going to erase my arm. I tried to point at it, but if you look, you'll see this little tiny bead towards the middle of that piece. It's little
Yeah,
green.
I can see.
Mhm. And so that little green bead there, basically, like if there's a forest fire and it goes through, pine trees actually, they burn very quickly, obviously, especially if they're dried out. But when there's a forest fire, the pine cones actually will open up, and all of a sudden they will spread the seeds out. So it's like all of this hard frustration things, these things that are heavy, things that look destructive, end up actually eventually helping. They are a sign of where things can still grow. And so I'd gone through kind of a hard part in my faith, with at this point, some things had fallen apart at my church. Long story short, essentially, um, there were some divisions over things and things like that, and a lot of people left. And so it was kind of this idea that um, we've just kind of gone through a wildfire, but you still, you can't really put your hope in just certain small things. Like you have to think of the bigger picture, and knowing that you can still grow from these things. And so that's kind of where this particular piece is. It's sign of life. It's things will happen in this life that aren't fun, that you don't want to have happen, but you can still grow and still live through it, and live even better from it. And so that's kind of like where this piece comes from. Another piece I could show you.
Yeah. Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. So like this one here, I'll have to move a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really the virtual part's kind of freaking out on that one. Let's see if I. I'll give you a close up a little bit. Here we go. So that one, you can see
Okay.
I have to use pop cans for that. I had cut up these pop cans, and it was actually, my grandma was passing away, and we were in
Mhm.
hospice, and I was drinking a lot of soda. Like, I normally drink a lot of soda, but I was drinking a lot of soda while I was there, and I was trying to think of something to do with my hands, because it's like there's frustration, and I'm not a person who likes to sit down for long periods of time. I have to work with my hands. I have to get up. I have to move. And so I started cutting up these cans, and I started thinking of ways that I could use these. And so as I'm working with it, I figured out ways that I could actually cut these, and there's special tools, that I have to make these perfect circles. Circles are actually another little secret symbol that I have. The idea of, kind of like this idea of perfection that we can't necessarily attain, but that we really want to be there. Because I can't cut a perfect circle. There's no way. So I have to rely on a tool to do that for me. It's something outside of myself. So there's just kind of that symbology there. But as I'm working with this material, and it's a very lightweight material, and my grandma passed away, and so I'm having to think about this, and all I could do is just make stuff. I mean, I can't go back. Obviously I can't change the events. I can just speak through with my art. And so, and I'll try to see if I can give you the shot here, but you can kind of see it's on a base. The base is red, and if I can just get out of the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can kind of see the base that's red there. On the other side of it, there's a little red bead. um, and it's inside a circle. It's kind of like if you're looking at, there you go, you see that piece there where you see the three circles, and there's that little bead in the center there, but it's a red one for this one. And that little red bead is actually from my grandmother's necklace. Not the one she was wearing when she passed away, but one I inherited. So there's all these little subtle things that I put in there that means something to me. So it's yeah. So there's the inspiration and motivation. So it's like inspired by nature. I learn from nature. I learn from other artists too. Obviously, you can't talk about my work without talking about Alexander Calder. Huge inspiration in my work. My parents took me there in Washington D.C. My dad was stationed at the Pentagon for a while. Um, my mom would take me to the National Gallery, and I would see all these things. And again, in a way, here I am full circle again. I had to go back. My mom passed away in September, unfortunately, so I had to go back to DC because my dad's in the military. Eventually, he'll be buried in Arlington. So I'm back at Arlington in the National Gallery, looking at all these wonderful Calders. They built a brand new, beautiful Calder wing. And I'm thinking about, again, full circle, so like I come back to this piece a lot, thinking about that. But yeah, so there's the motivation and inspiration. Motivation being faith and frustration. It tends to be kind of my two parts. And the part with working with kinetic pieces is when I'm working on a piece, like this piece, I'm actually creating more than one piece when I make a piece. Every time I make a piece, it's starfishes. If you know about how starfish grow, if you were to cut off a leg of a starfish, not that I'm recommending that you do, but if it were to happen, it actually grows into a whole other starfish, and which is quite amazing. I mean, nature is just an amazing thing. The more you study about it, the more you look at it, you're just like, I can't believe all the stuff that's all around us all the time. We just take for granted. But it happens with my kinetic pieces too. So I'll be making a piece and I work on it, and it's just a little too heavy, or it's just not quite the right look or whatever, and I'll put it in a pile. And I won't throw them away. I'll actually come back, and then I'll piece more of these little pieces together, and they turn into a whole different sculpture. So in those cases, I really let gravity do the work. I let gravity tell me what it wants to be. I literally let the forces of nature at play. I play around with the forces of nature in my work, which is kind of a funny thing to think about. But I play around with these, and I just see what develops, kind of like life. I mean, you're kind of going through life. You have a certain plan, but life throws you a curveball, and you just kind of got to either work with it or you don't. But you learn more if you work with it. And so,
This
yeah.
is so different from well, maybe it's not. Let me just ask you.
Oh, sure, yeah.
I think about the because I've watched your work, and I think about what it means to do a landscape or to do a portrait, and I think of what you're doing if you're doing a portrait and you're doing that kind of three-dimensional work. I mean, let me ask you this: how often do you do portrait work?
Portrait work, I don't do as often.
Hmm.
I like, here's a piece that I've been working on.
Right.
Obviously, talked about
Yeah.
this one. Um, like I said, 10 years. I've been slowly kind of working on this one. Portrait work for me is more of an academic thing
Yeah.
where, yeah, it's kind of where I'm trying to really sharpen my skills as an artist. I'm really trying, and the thing that artists get to do that most people don't is that when we're when we're in society, when we're looking around, we're not just looking, we're seeing things for what they really are. And one of the things that's very important when you work on a portrait is you have to actually not just look at a person's face, you have to see who they are and really see these small details, because every little detail matters in a portrait. And so it's kind of my way to kind of focus in and kind of control my my sight, and to really kind of sharpen my seeing skills. Um, that said, it can be a frustrating experience because it's like, oh, it's like, like for this one, I'm like, can I change this? The ear's right. I'm not quite sure. I'll be working on them. And then they're also the most highly critical pieces too, because people will notice it and they'll be like, well, is that eye really like, even if I look, and I'll be honest, I mean, I know not everything I do is perfect. I look at this one and I'm like, those eyes are way too big when I was working on that one, but that's okay. It's chalk art.
Yeah,
I can't
yeah.
write chalk art.
So
Um,
let me ask you
yeah,
this.
yeah.
Can someone come to you has that happened before where someone's come to you to have a portrait painted?
Yeah, that's happened. I mostly do like the charcoal.
Okay.
Portraits.
Yeah.
I do. I've done some paintings, but that honestly, I mean, art's also the business aspect too. I mean, there's
Yeah.
that comes with a premium because there's a lot of work
A
involved.
lot of work. Those are expensive. What about has anyone come to you to commission you to do, aside from commissioning a portrait, have they come to commission any of your three-dimensional work, your sculpture
Oh
work?
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah?
I've actually had a lot of different experiences with people wanting me to make some custom pieces. I did a custom piece, believe it or not, for the University of Dayton. They had asked me to create when they have their I'm trying to think, the creche exhibit that they have out there, where they have all the nativity scenes and everything. And they had actually asked me to create this large mobile, one of the largest mobiles I ever made. And there was these pieces that was installed into the library during that exhibit. And I made all the pieces a part of the nativity. So there's these kind of figurative pieces that were there. It was a lot of fun to work on, and it was quite the challenge because it's like most of the time when I make artwork, I kind of have an idea, but I really let it be what it is. But for this particular one, it's a portrait in a way. I
Mhm.
very much abstracted it, but I kind of have to have certain motifs in there, like I obviously have to have, the baby Jesus, Mary, Joseph, things like that. Those have to be in there. It's part of the piece. So I have to really work with those balance issues, and I had to work around those for some. So it can be a little more challenging that way when you get certain kinds of commissions. I've
Uh,
had. Mhm.
No, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I've had people, who are just like, I trust you. I just want if you can make the base blue, if you can make the base red, and make it about 12 inches tall, I'm cool with it. And I'm like, okay, great. And yeah, sometimes I'll have people that actually want. I did actually this was a fun one. I just remembered this one. I had my printmaking professor, because believe it or not, I actually started in printmaking at Wright State. Yeah, so many different mediums, but I switched to sculpture um, during this process because I was just learning metal at Wright State. I never done it before. And my printmaking professor, Kim Vito, kind of life going full circle again, came over to my studio several years back, and she knew I was making these kinetic pieces, and she said, I have these specific things that I want you to include into your mobile. Like, you have to use these specific elements. And we worked together, and I actually made it for her on site there, and she took it home the same day. It was pretty neat. She had she's out on the farm, so there was you know, parts that you would find. So there was some rusted nails and some other things in there. And it was a really fun piece actually. But the whole printmaking, the sculpture thing happened when I was working with aluminum sheeting, and my again life giving you a lesson as you work. Uh, this aluminum sheeting for a lithography. I had done a lot of lithography with stone, but I was experimenting with aluminum for that, and it worked horribly. It went miserably. It just didn't work at all. And the plate, I didn't do the chemistry right. I'm not a chemist. I'm an artist, so the chemistry didn't work. and the image just, it went solid black. It didn't have any image at all. It just didn't work. So I was like, well, that goes that print. And so when I was like, well, what can I do with this piece of aluminum? And so I started to cut it up. And as I was working, as I was cutting it up, I loved to make mobiles when I was a little kid. Um, I saw these mobiles in the National Gallery, and I was like, you know what, I could make one of these. That'd be kind of fun, just for fun. Not a requirement or anything at the university. I'm just gonna make one. And I cut it up, and I started making these mobiles. I'm like, ooh, oh, I'm liking this. So like I'm working on these, and I painted over it so no one would see the that was an old plate that I worked with. And then it really kind of started going from there. And I also found that it's a lot cheaper to make sculpture for me as a student, because you don't have to frame anything. There's a lot of pieces that I have framed. I love I love to make 2D pieces. I do, but I've found that over time, it's sometimes a little easier for me to make pieces that are sculpture based for that reason. So, as much as I like printmaking, I mean, I think you're going to ask a question about this one, but this is a print
Yeah.
that I
Tell
had
us
done.
about that.
This is actually a print I had done at Wright State. I thought it'd be kind of fun to include different
Yeah.
backgrounds, things like that. But this isn't the kind of print that a lot of people think. They'll probably, oh, that's a relief. Maybe you carved into a piece of wood and printed it. This is actually a silk screen, but I use a really weird technique to make it. Because when you make a silk screen, you do a lot of different processes. You can draw onto the screen, or you can do a more chemical process that's photo emulsion. And so you get an image, same kind of idea Warhol did, where you would find an image and then he would transfer it to the screen using this photo emulsion process. But instead of just finding an image, I created the image first. I poured the silkscreen ink onto a sheet of acetate, and then I carved away just with a quarter and just scratched away at the dry ink until I got it the way I liked it. And then I shot that image onto the screen, and then I silk screened it that way. So it's got kind of a relief plus silk screen kind of look for that.
Yeah.
So
That's so much fun.
yeah, and it's kind of like almost a hidden piece. It takes a couple seconds for you to see it, which I kind of like that too. Me being kind of an introvert, it takes a while to get to know me. So like slowly I will reveal myself, over time. Um, there's just a lot of different pieces I'll do. I mean, I do just for fun. Sometimes I'll paint like different things. Like I got the butterfly
Yeah.
that I have there. Like I got inspired a lot as I was working on the chalk pieces
Yeah.
there. I was like, you know what? I kind of do want to make something a little more permanent. And so I painted one of these several years later. This one's actually called the butterfly effect, because the idea,
Mhm.
where a butterfly can flap its wings and it changes the world eventually. I really like that idea. I was even thinking about that a little bit when I was working on these pieces here. You can kind of see that
Yeah. Yeah.
ripple effect happening there. But that's kind of the thought process behind there. So lots of layers of meaning and things behind there. So there's really, it's all connected by my head, even if most people don't see those connections immediately. Like it's actually, it's, to me it all makes sense. I actually had the chance to do a solo exhibit at Front Street Gallery,
Yeah.
in the Wright State Alumni Gallery. Actually, it's a really nice space, and I showed all my pieces together, and it does make sense when you start to see it. It's like, oh, it's one mind that's really exploring all these ideas together. Yeah, exactly. It looks like maybe I am chasing butterflies around, but it's, yeah, it's a full circle for me. I just can't sit still.
You know,
and what.
so right now with um with everything that's happening, you're not gonna, we're not doing public exhibits. So
Right.
there's a couple questions I have. So
Sure.
somebody that's out there and they're watching this and they go, this is just fascinating. I want to see more of his work. They can't go to a gallery right now to see your work. How can someone see your work, Matt?
Well, right now, probably your easiest bet is going to be my Facebook artist page.
Okay.
And it's just Matthew R. Burgy Artworks. And so you just type that in, you'll be able to pop it up. I will put out a disclaimer, though. I need to update that a little bit. Haven't really had opportunity to add a lot of different images there, but or you can just you can just email me or message me through that. I could even give my email if you want, but yeah,
That's really cool.
processes there. Um, and I need to get a website going. I know that I'm really behind on that one. But I would say that yeah, the Facebook is the quickest way.
So
Um,
artists
mhm,
have, a lot of artists, I mean, to make a living as an artist,
yeah.
for most of us, it's a challenge. And so we don't, the truth of the matter is, most of us don't do it for the money. We do it because it's a passion. And we
Exactly.
have other jobs. What else? I mean, are you still teaching? Are you, where are you working now?
Oh, oh, I guess I haven't. It's been a while since we've talked. Then I
Yeah,
yeah, I'm still making my artwork. I'm still exhibiting. In fact, I'm actually doing a couple virtual exhibits. Believe it or not, I've been contacted
cool.
for that. So that's something to stay tuned for over at Rosewood. Believe it or not. But I am working like a full time job as well. I still consider my art a full time job. It's all together. So really, as far
True.
as I'm concerned, I'm working two full time jobs. But my paycheck job, let's put it that way, is over at the Dayton Art Institute. I am actually now, I got promoted full time. I'm now one of a couple museum educators that are there. There's a lead educator, and then there's two of us museum educators that are full time. We also have several part time educators there too. I was a part-time educator there for years and years and years. I started back in 2006, took a break around 2009 to get my master's, and then I came back after I was a professor at UD for a little while, and then I got promoted full-time. So yeah, I'm at the museum, and in the midst of this pandemic, I'm still at the museum. I'm very fortunate to say, and we're working full time, making virtual virtual opportunities, virtual um, lessons and things that you'll see online. If you go on their Facebook, their website, you'll see things. There's a program called Art Ventures, which is really kind of an all-encompassing thing for families, to work together, where the kids can work along with the parents. And so I'm still doing that strong online. We were doing them obviously in person every second Saturday, or second and fourth Saturday, I should say. Um,
You know,
but yeah,
what's
that's one of my
there's
main gigs.
this space that space that you have at the Art Institute, that I just, that learning space.
Yeah, yeah.
What's it called?
Well, there's if you're talking about the kind of like the kids zone, that's the
Yeah.
experience center. Yeah, so we have the experience center there at the
Yeah.
museum. Wonderful space, and yeah, we'll do those there. We also do have several studios in the education wing that we've
Yeah.
been grouping classes in, and um, very excited there. One of my main jobs, I have several things that I do, and quite frankly, one of the main reasons I believe they've hired me full time is because I work in so many different mediums, but I'm also in charge of the studio. I oversee the studio. Kind of a good idea to have a working artist kind of preside over and look over all of the materials and kind of know what materials you need. And, so I'm super happy to do that for them. Like I help with their kiln. We got a new kiln. It was very exciting. So I'm be able to fire the kiln for projects and things there. Um, and yeah, and then my other main part is I oversee the YEC program, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with that program or not, but it's actually a mentorship program for college and high school students. So it's set up where basically I mentor the college students on how to mentor the high school students. So it's really kind of passing this mentorship down. your typical traditional apprenticeship is basically what you're kind of looking at there. Uh,
Wow. So
and
when you have young artists that that you encountered there and even when you're out, I know people come and ask you questions, and when you're out working, I've seen it. Uh, so what's the
yeah.
advice that you give to young artists?
Well, I mean, with young artists, there's a lot of things to think about. You really want to meet them where they're at.
Mhm.
Basically, depending on the age group, because there's obviously, with the degree in education, I can tell you the whole educational background, but essentially, um, on what age you're at, you really want to keep that artistic flame going. You know, um, you don't want them to think that they have to be massively talented in order to be an artist. You don't want them to think that if you don't make certain kinds of art, you're not going to be an artist or things like that. I basically just try my hardest to encourage them just to keep making and exploring and let the mediums take you where they go. I mean, I work in so many different mediums. I just, I keep learning every day. I mean, especially when you're in the museum, it's like, you look at this work like, oh, I don't like that one. Well, that's okay. What don't you like about it? And you're like, well, it's not like this one. Well, you do like that one. Well, yeah, I do like that one. Well, okay. Well, what do you like about that? It's again that whole like 31 flavors type idea, where um, it's not everything works for everybody, but everyone has their thing that they like, and I try to find those little seeds, and try to grow them, where I can, depending on where everyone is at. It's really, um, you try to find those sparks. My favorite when I teach is when I see a kid who's almost ready to give up. Like, you stop them just a second before they crumple the piece up or they throw it on the floor or, whatever it is, and you're like, wait, he's like, it didn't work this way, but what if you tried this? And I think that's one of the things we really miss in art education. It's not about becoming a full-on professional artist. It's learning about how to deal with change and how to deal with processes and how to think things through when things don't go a certain way, thinking creatively outside the box, you know. And so when I see their world change, when they realize, yes, this didn't work, and that's okay, you know. But look, I ended up making something even cooler, and I didn't even know I could do this. And then their eyes light up, and they get, it's like those, that's kind of the it, many teachers probably disagree with me, but it's probably better than caffeine. It's better than coffee. It's like it's something that really gives you energy. That
Yeah.
makes you just like, I gotta keep teaching. I'm seeing I'm affecting these students in very positive ways. I got to do this again. And yeah, to be able to be that for many students. I'm known at the museum as Mr. Matt. Um,
Yeah.
Many people are like, because they'll see my name, and so it's like Mr. Burgy doesn't it sounds like my dad. You know, I'm I'm like, yeah, Mr. Burgy, Mr. Matt. It has a nice little ring to it, and it's simple, and it's still somewhat formal. Because if someone says Matt, there's too many Matts in the world. I just, I was like, oh, is it talking to somebody else? Powerful complete, right? But over the years, it's funny. You teach somewhere long enough, and you have students come back,
Mhm.
and they've grown. I've had students that I taught that were like 5, 6 years old, and now they're taller than me. And they'll be like, Mr. Matt, and they're still just as excited, and they love to talk with me and see what's going on. It's like, you know, and you just realize, it's like, wow, you're making a bigger impact than sometimes you realize. It's kind of like, it's just like, I mean, going back to this, like making these small little things that you may not seem like much, especially to a kid, makes a big difference. Opening up their world to seeing the possibilities that are out there. letting them just know that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to use your feelings in positive ways. That's totally fine. You're angry, that's okay. Put it on paper. I think we forget um, that that's super important to art education. We they see it a lot in terms of a budget, like, oh, well, these materials cost so much. It's like, well, but what price tag can you really put on learning these life lessons? Like,
Yeah.
you really you need them. I mean, I get on a really long soapbox about the importance of art education. I really could. When I was a professor at UD, I was teaching an art education class, and um, some of my students even say, "Oh, he's on a soapbox."
And there he goes.
I'm like, "There he goes," and I'm like, "Well, it's what you're passionate about." And
Yeah.
yeah, and I've even had some of my college students come back. I was just walking. Where was I? I was at Staples, just getting office supplies or something, and I hear this student goes, "Professor Burgy," and I'm like, so I know from the title where they know me from, so it's kind of
Right.
nice that way. And I'm like, oh, well, someone knows me as Professor Burgy, and so I look around, I'm like, oh my gosh, how's it going? And she's telling me, like, it's like, you have no idea. It's like, I'm like, what? It's like, you taught me how to draw. Like, you taught me, because the class I was teaching was for education majors. They didn't have a degree in art. They weren't even after an art degree. This was kind of like an art supplemental class on
Right.
the importance of art and education, and how to train them a little bit. But the student was very, very excited that I had taught her how to draw, and had said all these wonderful things, and I was like, so sometimes you just never know. Sometimes if students, especially if they're quiet, and you just never know what they're absorbing, and then you hear these wonderful things, you're like, this is awesome. But yeah, it's you go into a grocery store, and you start hearing your name. I mean, you teach long enough, it happens,
It
and
happens. Yeah.
yeah, it's a wonderful thing.
That's a great thing.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
Matt, thank you so much for this today. I'm really looking forward to the next time, since we missed last month and the month before. So I'm going to be
I know.
looking forward to when we can make a real connection face to face again. It's
Oh
just,
yeah.
this is so wonderful. It really is. For everybody watching, uh, this has been an opportunity for us to get to know a lot of artists, these interviews. And so what I want you to do is, if you want to know more about CultureWorks, go to the website cultureworks.org. If you want to support CultureWorks and you want to understand what does it that support mean, get to that website at cultureworks.org, become a Passport member. It makes all the difference in the world. We support uh, through CultureWorks a wide variety of organizations and artists like Matt. So go to cultureworks.org and join the club, if you will, join the support. Matt, thank you so much for this. This has been wonderful. We've got to do it again. I'm really
Oh,
looking
fun.
forward to
Yeah.
catching up with you.
Oh, wonderful.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So great. Thank you. And we'll see you soon, I hope.
All right. Yeah, definitely. Looking
All right.
forward to it.
All righty.
Yeah.